Logo Live fam, I am so excited to introduce you to my next guest, Steven Canals, who's the co-creator and executive producer of the Golden Globe nominated show, Pose. He graduated from UCLA and got the MFA program where he started working on the pilot for Pose. He just signed a deal with 20th Century Fox. He is booked, he is busy, and guess what? He's here. Ladies, gentlemen, my queer fam, please welcome Steven Canals. Steven!
Hey, Johnny.
How are you? Welcome to Logo Live.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure to see your beautiful face.
Oh, likewise, always. I when we started the show, I was like, we got to get Steven. We got to get Steven. We got to get Steven. So here you are. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to come right out of the gate, coming in hot.
Oop, okay.
Pose.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of it, been around, Season 3 started this year. We didn't know what was going to happen. Pandemic came and said, hold on. So, and now you guys are back to filming. We are so happy about your resilience. Season 3, what's the tea? Give me something exclusive. I need an exclusive, Steven.
All right. Well, we've dubbed it season 3.2 to deal with all this, the madness of Miss Rona just throwing our entire schedule off. What's the tea? Well, I mean, so I'll give you what I've been sort of saying as like the company line for season 3, which is, for me, season 3 is all about how do your people, your true ride or dies, show up for you when ish hits the fan. That to me is really truly at the core of what this season is about. Some of the really exciting, more specific things that we're doing this season that I really love, we finally get to see Miss Blanca in a relationship. And so that's really fun. And we have cast an incredible Tony and Emmy nominated actor in Jeremy Pope, who a lot of folks are probably familiar with from Hollywood this summer, which was a big hit on Netflix. So Jeremy will be playing her boyfriend, Christopher. And so, one of the things that we're going to be exploring this season is, what does it mean for Blanca to continue to be a mother to her children, but to also want to be a partner? And what are the difficulties and the complications of trying to navigate these two very different roles?
Love that. Oh, well, thank you for that insight. I will ask also, on piggybacking off of that, I see the PPE, I see you all taking precautions. How has it changed from a year ago to now in what you're doing? Just because I know people are watching and wondering, how are we going to get those ball scenes? How are we going to, how's that working?
It's very challenging. There's obviously a lot of restrictions in terms of how much time we can spend on set. So, our hours every day have been dramatically reduced. The amount of time that we can have our actors, who obviously are at the greatest risk because they're taking off their masks to act in these scenes together. So that obviously impacts how long they can be filming for before they have to, mask up again and before they have to take breaks. And so it's been really challenging. We've actually made the decision to move all of the ball scenes to later in our production schedule, in hopes that, we'll probably see we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll see some progress. Whether it's with the vaccine, which, they're starting to administer this week, which is really great. And so hopefully as a result of that, we'll be able to lean in and give you all the fabulosity that you're used to seeing with our ball scenes.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for any of it and all of it. I want to take you back just a little bit to where you got your start. I think you did your first documentary when you were 15. So I wanted to ask you, for the viewers and for myself, what was it about filmmaking, cinema, TV that really pushed you to do this, to conquer this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I grew up in New York City, which is where I am now. And I grew up poor, you know, in housing projects. And this was in the midst of both the crack and AIDS epidemics, which were just eviscerating the LGBTQ plus community and Black and Brown communities, you know, all over the country, but specifically in New York City, and more specifically in my South Bronx neighborhood, where I grew up in the early 80s. And so film and television was a salvation, even more than an outlet, because truth be told, growing up as a kid, I never thought that I could create content. You know, I was simply a consumer of content. And part of that is that growing up as a young boy, there were no models. You know, there was no pipeline to go from, you know, the Castle Hill projects to Hollywood. And
Right.
so how do you make a way out of no way? You know, and so it wasn't until I was a sophomore in high school, and this was 1994, 95, that I had this opportunity to collaborate with classmates on a documentary short, which was funded by HBO Family, which was a nascent network at the time. And all of a sudden, my world just got rocked, because something that I had loved so much, which was, you know, just being planted in front of a television for hours consuming content, I was now responsible for crafting the content.
Yeah.
And it just dramatically changed everything. It was after that experience I said, I want to be a filmmaker.
And here you are.
And here she is.
Here she is. And it's so funny you say that, because I hear so many things about my own upbringing in like sitting in front of the TV and not seeing myself. And then, you know, a John Leguizamo would come on and it'd be like, you'd like hold those things so dear because they're so few and far between. You know, and like taking my parents' camcorder and going to the park and like recreating music videos just because that's what we loved, you know? So it makes me so happy to hear that and to know that we have you creating opportunities for us. And that
well,
being
and can
said,
I tell you that I'm so grateful for the opportunities that you have been creating as well and opening the door. Because look at you now hosting your own show on Logo, which is incredible. And I have to tell you, this is a true story. I don't think we've ever talked about this. I've never told you this, but when I moved to LA in 2012, I was stepping away from a nearly 10-year career working as a college administrator. So taking a huge chance, walking away from this career to launch a brand new career in film and television. And in that time that I was waiting for my career to break, you know, there were a lot of really rough days where, you know, you were just having to spam and rice it up, you know, and one of the places where I found joy and comfort was watching your videos. And when I tell you that I truly love and am obsessed with Julissa, like that is the truth. Like everyone and anyone that knows me knows I was like, you got to watch these videos. They're hysterical. I love her. I'm obsessed with her. Like this is a real talent. So when your video came through during season 1 for Pose, the minute it came through, I was like, oh my God, we have to cast him. I'm obsessed with him. We have to cast him. And I was so excited to have you on the show. So that for me was like a beautiful full circle moment. But I say that to say thank you for your light, because I don't think you realize like you've been giving that to us for quite some time as well.
That means a lot. I'm sorry, Mike. I just did. And I was actually telling Mike earlier, because this was going to be a question later on, but since we're on the topic, when I got the part and whatnot, I was so afraid, as you know, like as a creator, that you're thrust into, as I'm sure you were when you like met Ryan Murphy for the first time. You're just like, am I supposed to be here? Like, is this for real? And then I remember the day before I was supposed to go on set, I've told this to many people, as anyone that could listen, was that you reached out to me on Instagram and you told me that you'd been following me for a long time and that you were happy to have me. And that really, like, I cried then, just like I just did now, because you do set out into the world saying, this is who I am, and I'm just going to share whatever I have, and whoever's watching, watch. But you don't know who's watching. And that's something I wanted to ask you. What do you say to young Stevens and Johnnies and, you know, Janets and MJs out in this world, scared to put their work out because it's not on a big TV show or whatnot? What do you say to that child?
The first thing that popped to mind is there's a poet, Alex Olson, and in one of her poems, she has a line that I really love, that I encountered when I was in college, but it so deeply resonated with me, which is, my voice is my weapon of choice. And so to that I say, continue to use your voice in whatever way that you choose to use it. You know, so for us, it's for you, it's as an actor and as a performer. You know, for me, it's on the page as a writer, as a storyteller, but in whatever fashion it is, hone your craft. You know, think about who it is that you want to be in the world. You know, have intention and purpose, and then continue to work, hone that skill and put it out in the world, because it really, it matters. You know, it matters, and it helps us all connect with one another as humans, which I think in this current climate is so critically important. And also, as you pointed out, you never know who is going to be touched by your work. You know, I think to this day, there's a video that you posted of, it's when it's when Julissa goes to the wedding and then she gets her Shake Shack and she's like, and I cannot tell you, whenever I'm having a bad day, I will pop that video on. Like my best friend Aaron and I, the number of times we'll be like, "Baque," like we do that all the time. Like that's my favorite video. I'm obsessed with it. But I think, like, you know, it's part of it is that joy and that connection that joy then creates for us. But also, you know, you're a multi-talent, and so like I would like to believe that you would have landed that job as Costas on Pose regardless. But you know, the power in you not dimming your own light and putting your work out into the world, you know, it was that you and I already had a connection without you knowing it, right? Yeah. So that when that video then comes through and I see that casting tape, it's like, that's who I want to be part of this project. You know, I want that same light to be part of what we're creating here. And so I think that's for everybody listening, like that's ultimately what you want. Just put your voice out in the world. I think about the other person who really comes to mind is someone like Issa Rae, right? Who was working on Awkward Black Girl and was just creating this really small, really low budget, but deeply personal show that she was posting up on YouTube. And it was through that she then gets the attention of Pharrell and Shonda Rhimes. And then it's coming off of connecting with these people who love her voice that she gets this huge deal. And now look at what she's become. And Insecure is this massive hit on HBO. And so, you know, I just think, just put the work out there, you know, and don't be afraid to let your bright light shine, and don't let anybody else, if you're dimming your own light, you know, no one else is going to, you know, pump up the volume and you know, live in the rays of you. You have to do that first.
Yeah. Well, speaking of pumping up the volume, at the beginning of this hellscape of a year, you inked a teeny little deal with 20th Century Fox. So for the viewers out there, I would love if you have any tea on that, or if you want to talk about any of the stories that you plan on telling, so that the kids can follow, like, you know, get in line.
I love that. Yeah, so I inked a deal with an overall with 20th Television, whose parent company is Disney, and it's a really exciting overall deal. I'm excited to have a creative home there, because obviously that's where Pose lives, which is really exciting. But there are so many incredible networks, and all of them are doing really specific and distinct things, right? So through my deal, I can develop shows with FX and with Hulu, Fox and Disney Plus and Freeform. And so that to me, you know, as a content creator and again as a lover of television, that excites me and turns me on because it feels like being a kid in a candy shop. And it's like, ooh, what can I really create now for this particular place, for these people, for this audience? So the projects that have been announced so far under my deal are I'm working on a 1-hour drama series for ABC called In the End, which is about a death doula. Death doulas are people who are present, almost like spiritual guides who are there to aid us through the process of transitioning to the other side. And that might seem really sad and dark, but it's actually a really small, character-driven, really lovely story that is life-affirming. You know, it's all about the ways that we show up for each other and the ways that we love and support each other. So I'm really excited about that. And the other project that I'm working on is for FX, and it's a limited series called 81 Words. And it is all about Frank Kameny and Barbara Giddings, who are two really important individuals who were at the forefront of the very beginning of the LGBTQ movement. And so this their work predates Stonewall even. And so this limited series is really all about tracking their work to overturn the definition of homosexuality, which at the time, the American Psychological Association said that LGBT people, that we have mental disorders. And so they fought to overturn that definition so that we could have the freedom and the continued fight for liberation that we have now.
Love that. Well, you heard it here, folks. You got stories coming your way.
They're coming.
Yeah. Speaking of, you know, working on these stories, and just a lot of people don't hear about the behind the scenes, like the relationships that you build with your collaborators and, you know, that really turn into family. So for me, one of the things that is always so special, Black and brown and women and trans women specifically have always been such a big part in my growth as a queer man, and really understanding what that means outside of myself. So I wanted to ask you, working with our girls like Janet and Lady J and MJ and Angelica, you know, just like what you learn, and not even, and those behind the camera as well, what you learn daily from them, and like what's changed over the course of your knowing them.
Wow. That's a really beautiful question. I don't know how to synthesize all of the lessons. You know, that's such a big question. I mean, and it goes beyond. I mean, I think the easy answer, and I think that's the expected answer, would be, you know, how to stand in your truth and how to be authentically yourself and, you know, all of the good stuff. But the first place I go to is you know, I think about my relationship with Janet Mock, who, you know, I adore. And we just, whenever we talk to each other, we cackle like just two hyenas, you know, like we laugh so hard, and we, you know, she and I, like, we have real talk, you know. So I think there are those people who, like, they want to keep everything like right on the surface, and like Janet is someone who, like, I know I can dig all the way in with. And so we've laughed together and we've cried together and we've shared, you know, personal stuff with each other, and like we've been in the muck of each other's lives. And so you know, I think that's one of the things that's so special about working on Pose, is that it's allowed me to meet so many incredible people, and to forge new friendships and new bonds, and dig even deeper. And I think what the show is about at its core is love and family, more specifically chosen family. And that has been, I think, probably one of the greatest gifts coming out of this show, is, you know, like the time that I've had, all the opportunity that I've spent, and the time that I've spent with all of our producers and our cast, and all the incredible, specifically trans identified people on our show, has been so incredible and so amazing. And I think what it's done for me is it's really emboldened me to want to be a more fervent and stronger advocate and ally to the trans community, because I think it would be easy for me, like you as another queer cis man, to feel like, well, I'm also disenfranchised because of these identities. And so, you know, it's other people's responsibility and job to show up. And, you know, for me, I feel like, no, I've got to check myself and recognize that I have a lot of privileges. And, you know, it's like, it's the thing that I hope people get if they watch the show, you know, which is understanding that we're so much more alike than we are different. And I would hope that the show would open your heart up and force you to have empathy for people who are different from you. But, you know, how do you spend time on our set where you're around so many, not only trans, but queer and gender non-conforming people, and not want to just A, be your very best self, but B, show up for all of these people as well, you know? So that for me, I think has been probably the greatest gift.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about the conversations that you have a lot of times, even on Twitter, you know, a lot of the conversations with Black Lives Matter over the course of the year, one thing that always stands out to me is the intersectionality between Latinidad and being Black, you know, because being Dominican myself, I've grown up around a lot of anti-Black statements from Black people that are Dominican, you know, so those conversations, what do you hope, even shows like Pose and the intersections there, what can we learn from that and take it back into our Dominican households, our Puerto Rican households, all of those households, to really advance and get rid of the anti-Blackness within our own Latinx community?
That's really, that's a great question. And it's one that I think we all were, as a Latinx community, were forced to wrestle with this summer, you know, on the heels of, you know, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all these other deaths that happened at the hands of law enforcement. I think it really was a reckoning for a lot of communities. And, you know, for me specifically as a Afro Puerto Rican, you know, someone whose mother is a Black Puerto Rican, but spent most of my life identifying exclusively as Puerto Rican or Hispanic. And so the journey of getting to Afro Puerto Rican and specifically adopting Afro for a very intentional reason, which is the not wanting to erase our lineage, you know, and the rich history of our family that is both Puerto Rican and Black. You know, I think that what our audience can take away is the importance of acknowledging identity, and also taking a step back to recognize that identity, and specifically race and ethnicity, is so complex and nuanced, and it isn't as simple as just one identifier. You know, we want to put people in a box, and it's so much more complicated than that. And so, we have to be respectful of how a person chooses to identify, but also it's us checking our own privileges, right? Recognizing that to not, and this was something I was really vocal about in the summer, you know, if you as a Latinx person don't feel moved by the movement for Black lives, then you are in essence not supporting your own community, because there are Latinx people who are also Black, you know? And so I think there's this like othering that happens where it's like, well, that's their issue, that's not my issue. And also I think it's, you know, to take that one step further, I think it's similar to when we hear men, which I think that was happening like during the Brett Kavanaugh cases, which is, you know, you heard a lot of people saying the following statement, you know, as a person who has a daughter, you know, as someone who has a sister, and it's like, you don't have to have women in your life to be upset with what's happening in this country to women, you know, or to show up for women's rights. And so in the same way, it's like, you don't have to know anyone Black or have Black individuals in your family to say what's happening to Black people in this country is wrong. I need to step up and use my voice to say this has to stop. And so I think that's what's critically important when we're thinking about the Latinx community. Also, the last point I would make is just to not fall into oppression Olympics, which is, look at how bad it is for us. You know, where are the people who are speaking up for our community? These are all of our issues. It's like, you know, we're all rocking in the same boat. You know what I mean? Like, all of us are disenfranchised. We all have, you know what I mean? So it's like, let's just all be showing up for each other.
Let's share the paddle so we can get to shore.
Everybody's rowing together. Let's be honest. Exactly. You know, so
I did want to ask you, because queer television is popping right now.
It sure is.
And, you know, Pose is such a big part of like the explosion, I would say. What shows are you watching and binging right now that you're just like obsessed with?
Ooh, like right this second? Well, I was just watching that Real Housewives of Potomac reunion, which, baby, Miss Monique with her binder, she was not playing. She was like, that was a lot.
Inspiring us all, really.
Really though. I was like, I need to get my receipt game up. Okay, she was not playing. Let me think, like specifically, I'm trying to think of specific queer content.
Or if they can be like, you know, have queer characters or something that's spoken to you that you're like, oh, I love this vibe, or, you know.
I mean, I think one of the shows that I really love, this was earlier in the year, they just aired their second season, is Sex Education on Netflix. Like, I love that show. And I think, you know, there's this lovely representation of like a young Black queer man. And, you know, that's going back to your question about, you know, like intersectionality. It's like you so rarely see queerness and race intersecting in that way in film and TV. So that's one that sticks out for me because it feels so separate and apart. Because I think, not to get on a soapbox, but I was even thinking about like, you know, I'm always sort of scrolling through and seeing what people are talking about on social media. And I've noticed there's been quite an abundance of queer Christmas movies coming out, specifically in the last month. I know there's the one with Kristen Stewart on Hulu, and then there's like one on Paramount coming out, and I think there's one on Lifetime. And all of those movies, though, they're centering white queerness, right? So like, where are the Black and brown people? Like, where are the queer Asians? Like, it's like we just don't exist. So so anyway, all that to say, you know, Sex Education is one that stands out for me for that very specific reason.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Ira Madison about that. I'm like, when are we gonna write this Christmas movie, this queer Christmas? Because there's just so much richness in going home as a queer person, especially if you're Black and brown. Like the joke, like there is just so much richness in there that we're like also chomping at the bit to watch, because while you have like the Happiest Season, you could have these queer characters as a central, you know, focus. There's so like the aunties, you have, you know, all of these things that are so special.
Well, and I think to your point, the thing that we want most, and we've now discovered that, I would say, in the last, you know, 3 to 5 years, through this huge proliferation, specifically of Black content, is that audiences want cultural specificity, right? It's like, we want niche programming. So there's like this stinkiness about, oh, like nobody wants to watch a story with like a bunch of queer people. It's like, actually they do. So if you made it, the audience would show up.
And Hulu, the Happiest Season was like the most watched original film on Hulu ever. So it's like, people want to see us. we want to see us first. Second of all, people will get into it if we, you know, if you make good stuff, people are going to watch it. There's this idea in Hollywood that it's like, who is this show for? Bitch, it's for everybody. Like, who are you talking
but
about?
Also, is it so bad to be selfish and be like, it's for me?
Exactly. Right.
Like, I mean, I'll be honest, when I wrote that first draft of Pose, I was not thinking about the audience. I really was like, you know what? Like, this is what we were told when I was at UCLA. Write the show that you want to watch. So the reality is, like, that very first kernel of an idea was my ass being real selfish and being like, that's a show that I want to watch. Yeah. Period. You know?
Yeah.
Really glad that everybody else is enjoying it, but initially it was for me. So
for sure.
Yeah, it's okay to be selfish.
We need to learn more and more to just be selfish, because in that selfishness, you really, especially as Black and brown and queer identified people, you really are bringing everyone else in. There's a different level of empathy. I think this is just my understanding of being queer and, you know, being of color, that you do have a different level of empathy when it is coming to storytelling. And that, I will say, when you're casting, you know, trans women of color and queer people for queer roles, what level of richness do you think that brings to the role, rather than someone that hasn't lived the life, or, you know, is a great actress or actor but doesn't have the same kind of understanding, you know?
Well, I think there's a deeper trust, and then there's also, and I know what I'm about to say will speak to you as an actor, there's an interiority to that character's life that I don't have to go into, I don't have to explain it, right? In the way that in real life, you know, it's funny, because I was just telling somebody else this very recently, where it's like, the majority of the queer and trans people in my life, I have never had a conversation with them about their coming out journey. And it's interesting when I think about that, because the first time that dawned on me, I thought, well, that makes me a really terrible friend. You know, like, girl, get out your head, like, ask people about themselves. And then I realized, like, well, I think part of it is that there's just this unspoken respect and understanding, right? So even for people who maybe I don't particularly care for, if I know that you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, there's always going to be some fraction, some percentage of respect that I'm going to have for that person, because I know how difficult it is to walk through that door, to come out of it and to say, I am going to be authentically me, whatever that looks like for you. Right. And so those are the kinds of things that we don't have to talk about. Like, we don't have to dig it all the way into that. I already know that you bring that lens and that perspective with you. You know, you are now coloring in those lines, and that's less work that I have to do as a creator, as a producer, as a writer. I think when you're casting inauthentically, you know, this is no, it is. It's a lot of shade to all the straight and cis people who have played, you know, queer and trans over the years. It's like, you're looking at us and our lives like we're an experiment, right? So you're trying to like deconstruct what our journeys are. And it's like, we're not just some character, like, these are real lives, like, we're real people. And so I don't know, for me, it's just, there's a comfort and a safety and a trust that is immediately built casting someone who already holds those identities.
Yeah. Oh, love that. Love to hear it. I always tell people, because people are always like, well, good actors should just be, I'm like, yes. Of course. But there's just a different level of understanding. And also, when an audience sees me and knows that I'm a queer out actor, they have to take that in. Whereas if they see someone else who they know is dating a supermodel who's, you know, an Instagram star, they can say, oh, but that's just a character. That's not real. But they know I go home to a man, they have to acknowledge that. And they have to, when they see me, when they laugh at me or when they cry about my story, they have to, I'm a person to them at that point. So
I also think, just to push on that a little further, what I think this is really, what you bring up is an interesting point. And I wonder, you know, if you're casting actors who are queer, I think it's similar to like when we watch these independent movies where you have all these unknown actors, right? So it's like, why are they not hiring, you know, your, I don't know, like your Tom Cruises and your Denzel Washingtons and your Viola Davises and your Julia Roberts. You know, it's like, well, because sometimes watching those actors in big movies can take you out of it, right? Because you're hyper aware of who you're seeing on screen. And I think similarly, the first thing that came to mind is Call Me By Your Name, which is, sure, you know, it's a lovely movie, but I wonder how many people go into the movie saying, I'm only here because I really want to get to that moment where I know we're going to see some action between these two straight actors, as opposed to, I'm here to be swept up in this story and I'm really interested in the love between these two characters.